All right, let's get back into HyperCard authoring and programming. Today's module is Module 3, Authoring Objects. Let's get started. So, layers are also objects inside HyperCard, and when you're working with layers, it's probably the most complicated authoring element in HyperCard. While browsing the stack, it may not be obvious the effort the author has put into layering to the user, but it's well worth the effort. Your stacks will be a lot cleaner and make more sense if you pay attention to the layering. We'll look at the main two types of layering in HyperCard, object layers and background card layers, and then look into the details. So, object layers. Each object in HyperCard, these are buttons, fields, things like that you can manipulate with code and also the user through the user interface. You can see through those objects to the layers underneath them. If the object is opaque, like your typical button, the layers directly under it are obscured and you can't see through them. So let's try it out on a couple of buttons. If one button overlaps another, transparent or not, it will accept the mouse click, blocking the button on the lower layer from receiving it. So we've got two buttons here. Let me get to the tools. Let's go to the button tool. So you can see we have a transparent layer that is in front of this other button. Now, if we go back to browsing mode, I can click on this transparent button and you can see the action that takes place. And here's the other button. Oops. And if we go back to the button tool, let's move the transparent button on top of the other. Go back to the browse tool. And you can see that the click is being intercepted by the transparent button that's on top. And I can't really get to the button that's underneath. Go back and let's move things a little bit. Make it a little easier so that we can hit both. So you can see the region for this button outlined by the box here does stick out from the side a little bit. And we've got our transparent button on top. Go back to browse mode. So if I click over here, which is obviously in that transparent button's realm, but we can also click over here now that we're outside of the button that's in front. So pretty simple. You can change the order of these buttons. We go into the property, there's this transparent button. You can see it's card button number 2. And this is card button number 1. So the transparent button was created after the initial one. And we have the button number 2 selected, or excuse me, 1 is selected. And we can bring it closer. So now it's in front of the other button. Go back to the browse mode. You can still click on the transparent button because it's out there, but the opaque button is now in front. So you can control the layer ordering by bringing that button forward or back. Background and card layers. So let's take a look at the layers in detail. As the author, you'll envision the layers on the left, and you have to keep this stack of layers and the order for them in your mind so that you can make sure that you're designing your stack the correct way. The user will view them combined as seen on the right. So you can see from this that we have the background picture, that's the bottommost layer, and then moving towards the front, towards the user, you've got the left button layer, So that would have been the first button that was created. You've got the right button layer, and then the field layer. Background layer aesthetics. We'll start with the lowest layer and work our way up. Authors often create their stack using a real-life graphical metaphor for the background, like an address book or a calendar page. Using the look of common items familiar to users can help them to understand how your application works. There's a phrase that's used in web development called mystery meat navigation. And there was a time early into development of websites where some unique graphics would be created so that you could navigate through the page. And unless you hovered over them, you might not recognize that it's a clickable region on a graphic. Worse, sometimes they never had any kind of visual indication that you were even hovering over that area. You had to guess where you were supposed to click. So it's fine for games, if you're doing one of those Pajama Sam-like games where you're searching for objects and things, you might not want to show what's clickable because part of the game is discovering things. But if you're doing an application, normally you want the user to be able to tell exactly what they need to click. Keeping it simple and not too busy with a simple blank background can help your users focus on the application. That doesn't mean that every application should be devoid of any graphics or anything. I mean, that would be rather boring too, but it should be something that enhances the experience, not something that detracts from it. Background information. So to bring up the background information dialog, you can select the background information menu item from the objects menu. So let's go ahead and do that. Background info. Okay, so it pops up this window here, and it has things like the name for the background. So you can reuse backgrounds in various cards. In fact, if I were to create a card while I'm on this card, it would use the same background. This background is shared with 52 of the cards. It has an ID just like any other object. It's got 2 background fields and 2 background buttons. I don't have it set to not search. You could set it so that you can't delete the background, so you wouldn't accidentally remove a background. I've not found a need to do that. So one of the ways you can see the background is you can click Command B or background from the menu. Your title bar changes so that it's got hash marks on it. And now you can see that this background has got this simple image here of a stack on it, and it's got the navigation buttons. They're common to the background because I'm going to go to a previous card or to the next card. So you, instead of repeating those buttons on every card, you put them in the background and share the background. Card layer aesthetics. So a lot of authoring has to do with the aesthetics of what you're building. The card graphics layer is transparent and allows the objects on the background layer to show through. You can use objects on the card layer to hide or show objects from the background layer. So for example, let's say I wanted to use the same background for previous and next for navigation, but if you're on the very first card, you probably don't want to go to the last card by clicking previous. By the same token, if you're on the last card, you probably don't want to go to the next card, which would be interpreted, since it's a circular reference, as the first card. Well, you could very easily modify this particular card by putting an opaque object over the top of the button to obscure it from the user. Let's say you created a new button. All right. Now, this button is transparent, but let's modify it and make it opaque. Doesn't need a name or anything. We're not going to have any action that it does. Now it's an opaque button. It's a little big. We're going to make it the same size because we don't want the user to be able to click on any of this. And we're going to drop it right over the top of that button. Let's go back here. Now it's opaque. You can't see through it. It is the newest button I've created. It's on the card layer. And you notice that I can't click the next button. So if we look at the background, we still have our button here. We haven't done anything. All we've done is put something on the card layer in front. And if I go to the previous card, you can see it. We're sharing the same background. All I've done is created a button that doesn't do anything over the top of the background layer on this specific card. And we're back. So card information. So there is, same place where we get to the background information is a dialog for card info. Again, same things, name, the ID of the card, what number card out of all the cards this is. So this is the 8th card of 54. So there's an order to the cards. You can mark cards, and I believe we covered this in a previous module. Marking a card allows you to do things like do a command to all marked cards. You can indicate you don't want this card to be searched. Maybe it's an index card or something like that that's got an index into the other cards. Maybe you've got a card that you don't want searched because it's an index card to the rest of the stack. You can mark it so it can't be deleted. Okay, and obviously you can also do a script for the card. Copying and pasting cards. So you can copy and paste a card to create a duplicate of the card that you could just copied. Now HyperCard recognizes the background is the same and does not duplicate it. You can cut and copy a card. When you do this, you are cutting or copying the entire card, including its background. The card is placed in the clipboard, and you can go to another stack or somewhere else in your the order of the cards on your current stack, and you can paste it in there. This adds not just the card, but also the background associated with the card. Fields. So fields are the most frequently used object in HyperCard. Fields are used to store textual information. To work with fields, you select the field tool from the toolbar. So I'm going to peel this off so that we've got it available to us here. This is the field tool, and it exposes the fields so that you can work with them, select them, and edit the properties. So there's a bunch of properties for the field. And you can create new fields. You select the field tool, and objects, new field, new button, new background. You can also command drag to create a field. That's true of any object. So let's get back to browsing, go on to the next. Field order. Just like other objects, there's an order to the fields. They're ordered one after the other as they're created. So the first one you create is the farthest in the card. And as you create them, they fall into order in front of them. The order can be very important from a user's perspective because you can tab between fields on a card. So if you're on the first field that was created and you tab, it's going to take you to the second field, etc. Let's do a field example. So we're going to go to the practice stack. And we are going to, this stack has several fields on it, and let's explore how they work. So as you hover over a field, the cursor changes to an I-beam, and this indicates that you can click inside the field and edit the text. We're going to add a note here. So now is the time for all good people to come to the aid of their country. Now if I tab, it'll take me to the next field, and to the next one, and then to this one. There's 3 fields on this card. It selects the text when you get there, so you have to be careful, because if you start typing, you're going to wipe out the text. But pretty simple. So let's go back. We're going to use the recent feature so that we can look at our stack. And our most recent one, here we go, we're back to our field example. So changing the field order. You can alter the field order just like we did with buttons, so that the tab order is controlled. And you do that by moving a field either farther back or bring it closer to change the order of the fields on a card. So let's go back to our practice stack, and let's change to the field button, and this is the first field, and you can see it's background field number 2. This one is background field number 3, and background field number 5. So let's say we want to change it so that the number is the first field. So what we want to do is send this farther back. Let's give it a try. So if we tab from here, you'll see that this is the first field, this is the second, and this is the third in the tab order. And it's a circular queue, so if you're on the last field, it goes to the first, then the second. Field styles and properties. Fields can be transparent, opaque, rectangular, shadow, or scrolling. You can't mix styles as you can with fonts, unfortunately. There are 10 options that control things like locking text, not wrapping, etc. You can double click on a field to display the field info if you're in the field control. So we'll do that for this one. You can see this is called body. It is the first background field. It's transparent, and you've got all the properties here that you can set. So you could lock the text so that the user can't type in it. You can set it up so it doesn't wrap. There's any number of fields here, and you can set the default text style for the field. Transparent and opaque fields. The transparent style fields are invisible when in browsing mode. There's no border or any other visual indication of the fields on the screen. You can tell that it's there by moving your cursor over the top of the field, and the cursor will change from a browse tool to the I-beam. Of course, if you've got it set to lock text, it doesn't change the cursor, so you wouldn't know. Opaque style fields are plain white area without a border. An opaque field hides the background graphics layer, obscuring anything that's under it. Rectangular shadow and scrolling fields. So rectangular fields, just what they sound like, they're rectangular. They have a black border. You'll often find this style of field accompanying a text label indicating what the field is used for. Shadow style fields are the same as a rectangular field with the addition of a drop shadow. Scrolling style fields adds a scroll bar to the side of the field so that you can do vertical scrolling. There is a 30,000 character limit to the text that you put in there, and we'll talk more about that later. So locking the text and show lines. So lock text is like you would think. It locks the text so that the field is read only by the user. And again, the I-beam cursor doesn't show when you hover over it. So it just becomes an element of text on your card. Show lines displays a dotted line across the field for each text line on the field when it's visible. So let's do that. We're going to change this to show lines. Go back to browse mode. Now you can see the line, so it's more like an index card that's got lines on it. Let's undo that. So you might be asking yourself, why would I use a text box that's locked and opaque and or transparent just to put text on a card if I could use the graphic tools to just type on a card and you've got text showing in the card? What if you need to change that text? If you're using the graphic tools to type in text, you can't edit that later. You'd have to go back, erase it, and redo it. Wide margins and auto tab properties. So you can set up wide margins to give you some control over the text formatting of the field. You might wish to increase the space between characters and the edges of the field. The left-right margin is increased by about 1 character, and the top and bottom by about a half a line. The auto tab controls how the return key behaves at the end of the field. As you can imagine, as you're typing into a field, you could set it up so it would automatically tab to the next field if you filled up that field. Fixed line height and don't wrap properties. So the fixed line height, when it's turned on, prevents the lines from changing to adjust for the different font sizes. So as you're editing a field or your user is using a field, they can change the font and change the size of it so that the lines would automatically adjust to handle that text. Well, you can turn that off so it doesn't do that. Don't wrap keeps the lines of text from automatically wrapping from one line to the other. You might use this if you were creating a index or something like that where you did not want it to wrap text around. You want to control exactly what text is on each line. Don't search and shared text properties. So don't search again protects a field from being searched so it doesn't show up. I've got a typo. Matching strings on all the fields. Your stack might contain fields you don't want searched, like an index. Shared text is a property only found in background fields. It allows text in a field to remain the same between cards. So let's say you're using a text field on a background for some kind of instructional thing or something like that, and you want that text preserved between cards so that when you create a new card and the background is copied, the text comes along with it. You would use that property. Fonts. Now, fonts properties there's a lot you can do with fonts. You can change the default font attributes for a field. And if you do that, as people type into the field, that would be the font that is used. You can change the text alignment, left, center, and right. That does what you would expect. Line height can be important. If the distance in points between lines of text needs to be set, you can use that feature. You might need to adjust line height to squeeze text into a smaller area. System fonts. Something very important about HyperCard. You need to plan your stack for the commonly available fonts that are on a system. There is a mechanism that allows you to include fonts in your stack. And there are a couple of reasons you would want to do that. Maybe you've got a custom font or a rare font. You do have to be careful about doing that. It can corrupt the stack. So make sure you keep a copy of everything before you try it. It's frowned upon creating, pulling fonts into stacks. There is one reason why I really strongly would suggest doing this, though. If you're using a font to create animation for your stack, you're going to want to embed that in your stack so that you can use it. So here are the commonly used fonts that are available on a Macintosh system. Stack fonts. Again, you don't want to attach fonts resources to your stacks. It was a common practice early on, but it can be problematic. You could include a font that is already on the system and it's going to confuse it. Group text style. Group text style does not have a visual effect. When a field text is locked and the user clicks on a word in the text, it is selected, and that's used to to be able to search for things, or if you want to you just want blocks of text selected and their words, that's the default feature. But if it's grouped, not only the word clicked is selected, the entire block of text is selected. Unfortunately, the only way you can use this feature is to do some HyperTalk programming, so we'll have to cover that in a later module. Reverse lettering technique. So this is a technique you can use to reverse the lettering so that it's white text on a black background. You have to use a combination of a painted black background and a transparent field and the outline font style. So let's take a look at this. So here is we've got some locked text. It's got reverse lettering for the text style. So it's outline, Geneva here, and also create a black region that's the same size, and you overlay your transparent field on top of there, you can get reverse lettering. Creating text fields. So there are a couple of ways you can create text fields. Just like with buttons, you can create them either in the background or the card layer. The easiest way to create text fields is to pull down the Objects menu and select New Field. A rectangle field with 5 lines will appear in the center of the screen. The field is selected, so it's very easy. You could just go up here and say New Field. Boom, you've got a new field right in front. It's already selected for you. Let's get out of the field. Second way of doing it, it's a bit more involved, but it is preferred by some authors. You pull down the Tools menu and select the Field tool. Hold down the Command key, and this creates a plus sign, so let's try it. Hold down the Command key. Now you can drag a field to be whatever size you want it to be, and it remains selected. Customizing fields. You will probably want to adjust the location, size, font, other properties of a field rather than accept the defaults. A 5-line field dropped in the center of your screen is probably not optimal. You can move and resize a field, and to do that, you just select the Field tool. And we're going to go ahead and create a field. So Command created a field. The field is selected. You just grab hold of the upper corner. You can resize it. If you grab it anywhere not in the corner, like in the center like that, you can drag it. But you can see if I'm grabbing it by one of these corners, you can adjust the size so you can get it exactly where you want it. Let's go back to browse. So some of these do not seem to work in this version of the operating system. It probably requires perhaps OS 9 or one of the later systems for it to work properly. For example, linking to a URL doesn't appear to work from my version here, which is, get to the filer. System 7.6.1. So So your mileage may vary depending on which OS you're using, but a lot of them do work. I don't have a movie on here, so I haven't been able to try that. But setting a destination, let's go look at what you do. So you click on the Tasks tab inside the button properties. You can go to a destination, and there's many to pick from. You can go to the last card, next card, things like that. So you could create those buttons for previous and next card that I'm using without having to write any script. You can set a visual effect in a script and then have it go to a destination. You can launch an application. One of the things you could do, let's go over to the other one that's actually set up for it. You see that it opened up the text reading application and actually opened up a specific document. So if we look at the actual button here and go to Tasks, Launch Application. So it launches an application, simple text, and with the document README. So you could have it open up any other thing. Link to URL. You're supposed to be able to just type a URL in here and have it work. It did not work in this. It's probably because the going to the internet is not integrated into the OS the way it should be here. Playing a movie. So you should be able to pick a movie here and play it. Playing a sound. So let's go.
How are you today?
That was the sound that I selected. You can also use the text-to-speech feature. So let's take a look at that. So I've got it set up to do, let's say, a robotic voice, and it's going to speak this string. Back to the browse.
All your base are belonging to us.
Anyway, so there are ways to enhance your stacks without having to do any HyperTalk scripting at all. And that's it for this module. So I want to thank everybody for viewing. You can find me on YouTube. I'm on Twitter at Eric's Edge. I have a Patreon if you care to support what I do here on the channel. You could do it for as little as $1 per month. I have a blog called Pragmatic Pizza that I've had for quite a while, and lately I've been doing some Apple II Pascal programming on there and some other stuff like that. I'm on Reddit as SDGOL, which is there's a story behind that, but it's the handle that I used for gaming with my kids, called the Supreme Dark Galactic Overlord. And if you know anything about Heinlein juvenile novels, you'll recognize that. And I also have a small webpage at home.macintosh.garden called Eric's Edge, and that is written so that vintage browsers should be able to browse it. It's just regular HTML 1.1, I believe. All right, well, thanks again, and I'll see you on the next video.